Hello, everybody. We are live. I am joined with Mike Manfredi of the Clarion team. I'm here to talk about fractal governance, the what, the why, the how, all the good things. Mike, how you doing today?
Doing great. I'm just reminded of how much energy and thought I put into that title. So I worked hard on that, I got to say.
It's good. It's important to have a good title. I want to remind everyone we do actually have a title, and yeah. So I've been away for a couple of weeks, and Chris Barnes has been kind of running the show here, and I think he wanted to pick up where you left off last 2 weeks ago and cover some ground there. So why don't you go ahead and jump in and bring us all up to speed.
Yeah, so I'll actually start with my hour. This was Brandon Fancher's, and now it's our slide set update. So let's start with our standard format. If you want to share the shared screen, perfect. Thank you. So this is a pretty simple one today. Disclaimer: everything changes, time passes, stuff changes. We're running as fast as we can, so take everything with a grain of salt. And if I say something different 2 weeks from now, or Brandon says something different a week from now, then take that instead of this. I think that disclaimer is going to get shorter each week. Resources we want to repeat so that everyone knows they're out there. EdenEOS.org is where you can find basic information on Eden. The public Eden Wiki, which is at wiki.eoscommunity.org. This is a Notion wiki that is full of information. We have tried our best to organize it. I hope you find it organized. You will find lots of information there. And if you want technical information, high-level information, details about Eden, we have lots and lots of stuff in there, so we encourage you to check that out. And if you're technical and want to contribute or follow what we're up to, progress we're making, you can all see that in the open source repo at eoscommunity/Eden. No announcements today, so we'll go right on to updates. Let's see, is that true? No announcements. I didn't think about that much. I don't think there's any announcements. If I think of one, I'll add it to the updates. We'll just call it an update. Clarion OS. So 2 main updates for Clarion this morning, even though I have 3. So last we spoke, Todd was boxing up what he had gotten done with the GraphQL implementation. That is now boxed up to be used in Eden. And Todd has been actually working on setting up actual Eden queries, like doing queries that we're going to want to do, or we are doing a version of, and starting to generate history, meaning queries, answers to questions that we literally can't ask right now. For instance of the abstract, not necessarily something Todd has specifically done, what the kinds of things he's working on and using this technology will allow us to know, for instance, who in a completed election round, or a round in a completed election, who voted for whom. That information is only in the blockchain history. It's not in the RAM. It's not in the current table data of the contract. So I haven't been able to query it. And with Todd's work, we'll be able to do that. So he's actively starting to generate query results that gives us answers that we haven't had up to this point. So that's super exciting to see that coming together. And then update on the move to the technical. I mentioned 2 weeks ago that I had handed the reins of diving in technically into Clarion to Stephen. He's done a great job assembling a set of questions for Dan. We got Dan, Todd, and Stephen on a call recently, and Stephen picked Dan's brain. Dan allowed his brain to be picked, and we did some really great work ironing out how is Clarion going to accomplish this peer-to-peer communication platform we've been talking about? I don't have that crunched into a presentable form yet, so I can't say much about that coherently yet, but I think eventually I'll get that in. I have some ugly slides, but they're completely just my chicken scratch notes. So I'll make those slides into something consumable, and I look forward to sharing those in a future update. With that said, that's not much of a change in terms of like actual Q&A. I can Q's I can A. But if anyone's out there with questions about Clarion, feel free to ask. If you're new to the live stream, I'm sure you have questions. If you have any specific questions that you wonder about still, haven't gotten answered, let's get those answered now. Anything showing up in the chat yet?
Not yet. We got a very sleepy crowd this morning.
Okay. We'll leave that open. Feel free to ask questions. I'm happy to come back to this topic as questions come up. And once I get the updates crunched into actual new information, I'm sure there'll be new rounds of questions, and that'll be soon. I think I'll have that a couple weeks from now. All right, let's see what's next. Fractal Governance. Okay, so as always, again, if there's people new to the community, this is where you guys can ask questions about the process and about the book. Always happy to answer those questions. If you have them, please do drop them in the chat box. For now, I'm going to default to continuing the conversation from 2 weeks ago on the flow of funds for the induction arbitration in particular. So this is the scenario where somebody submits a profile that doesn't conform to community rules and gets reported. What do we do about that? So I'm going to switch what I'm sharing. And we can talk about that. Tab. Nope, that's not right. This one's the one. For those of you who weren't with us last time we talked about this, this is ugly. I said that a whole bunch of times last time. This was something we actually kind of came up with as a spur of a moment topic that Chris thought would be interesting. And it is certainly an interesting topic. It just isn't anything I had prepared to be pretty. And since you guys saw it ugly, I just left it ugly. I did pretty well last time setting up what we're looking at here. So rather than recap all that, I'm going to spend all of today's time actually digging in. So if you're looking at this and not following the conversation, check out 2 weeks ago. That'll be a good setup. The really, really high level this is the induction flow from the perspective of a profile being disputed. So if someone invites a member, what do they stake? What do they donate? New member donates 10 EOS, and each the inviter and the endorsers, each induction member, will stake 30 EOS. And if you're really new to everything, staking is a bond. You're putting money behind what you're claiming. So this represents the group saying, we are endorsing this new person and we're willing to put a bond to our word that this will work out well. And the new member puts in 10 EOS as their membership due. And so we have 40 EOS in the proverbial pot. Someone reports the bad profile, so a bad picture or a picture that doesn't match the person in the induction video. The reporter is going to stake 40 EOS, and he's putting a bond, or she is putting a bond on her word that they're reporting. They're making a legitimate report. So they're putting 40 EOS up that will be returned to them as long as they're acting honestly. But this is this is putting money where your mouth is, pretty literally, not literally, pretty specifically. And so each of these yellow boxes adds whatever is happening at that stage. So now we add 40 EOS staked by the reporter. So invite someone, report someone, first round resolution. If first round resolution doesn't work out, we go to second round resolution. So that's the high level of what you're seeing. Yellow boxes are what's been put in. The flow is by column. And then the last thing, high level, is these bold groups. These are the results of that scenario, right? So we have reporter reports a profile. Resolution 1, it was a mistake, and it's corrected by the people who participated in the induction ceremony. Resolution 2, invitee fraud. Resolution 3, the people in the induction meeting contest the report. They say, no, this is a legit report. This reporter is not making a legitimate report. That turns into a second round because now we've got to bring in other people that we call here the jury. So this is, if resolution 1 scenario pans out, the reporter gets 40 EOS. He's up 40 EOS. So not only did he stake 40 EOS, he got that back, but further, he got 40 EOS. Where did that come from? Well, the witnesses are each down 10 EOS, right? If they made a mistake, then they're down 10 EOS for making a mistake. The new member is down 10 EOS. And all of that can be transferred to the reporter to incentivize him to report this profile. Let me pause there because I'm talking a lot. Lovejoy, any questions about that? You're actually new to this, so you're a good person to ask. Anything unclear about this? Anything that deserves more attention so far?
Yeah, so far from a new user standpoint, if I'm the new user and I just kind of, I guess this isn't like, yeah, let's say it's a mistake that I make on my profile and then it gets reported. The net effect is that after it goes through this process, if I'm, oh yeah, that was my mistake, I lose the 10 EOS and then have to resubmit, or how does that? I'm thinking from a new member perspective, like,
So
yeah,
this 10 EOS is in the treasury, right? This was a due paid to the treasury. So this isn't staked. This is donated.
Okay.
And then each of the witnesses has staked.
I see.
So if a mistake is made, there's a disincentive to not check your work, essentially, and an incentive to pay the reporter for reporting a profile that's not accurate. And, you know, for people who haven't joined the community or forget what this process is like, we're talking dirt simple stuff. This isn't like, oh, you made a spelling mistake and you're losing 10 EOS, right? This is like your picture is you. And we have checkboxes to say, did you do this? Did you do that? Click on these links and make sure they work. This is very simple and very, very easy to not make a mistake. It's actually not that easy to make a mistake now that the checkboxes are there. So yeah, this is a non-trivial mistake.
Gotcha.
This is, you know, at this point, I would go as far as to call it negligence now that we've updated the UI to make this easier to not make a mistake.
Yeah, I've seen the process now a couple of times, and all the radio checkboxes make a big difference. No, this all makes sense to me, but again, I've thought about it, and I watched your other one with Chris, so it's not completely new to me.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a lot to sort out in a way that doesn't start to. Y'all definitely had to put some thought into this, making it not self-contradictory.
Yeah, and I'll go through what I want to do today is I'll go through each scenario, each step in the process. We'll talk about how it works out. And then I actually went back to work on this last one and stopped because I wanted to I wanted to show an example where we're not fully cooked, so you guys could see the kind of work that has gone into the rest of this. So this is resolution number 1 is negligence checking the profile. Let's go on to resolution number 2. So invitee fraud. And why we say invitee fraud is what we're saying here is the witnesses weren't at fault. Like, they invited someone they knew, they expected good behavior, but the new member just, shared a fake LinkedIn with, a fake LinkedIn account or something where they were trying to misrepresent themselves, which again, in this community matters a ton because it's about representing yourself. It's about knowing who we're all dealing with. And there's funds involved and identity matters. So if the invitee actually is fraudulent, like to the people who invite them, then you can look at how all this pans out. But the result of it is the reporter gets paid. So we incentivize the report. That's a good thing. And we don't let the witnesses don't get off scot-free, but it's half the penalty, and the new member loses their 10 EOS. So again, the incentive structure here is set up reasonably well, where the fact that you invited someone who would commit fraud is worth penalizing, but less than knowingly committing fraud or being negligent. And the reporter gets a reasonable, finder's fee, if you will. Now, why is this reduced, right? Why is this 40 and this 25? Well, we've changed how much we're penalizing the witnesses. They have all staked 10 EOS each. We're giving them back 5 of their EOS that they staked. And so this is only built out of the 5 EOS that we capped and the 10 EOS from the new person. And that, that balance works out. We incentivize and disincentivize the right things in amounts that make sense. All right, non-resolution scenario number 3. The witnesses and the people in the induction meeting say, hey, I don't know what this reporter is talking about. We did a legit induction and all the info in the profile is legit. Well, they're making a claim after someone has made another claim. The reporter makes a claim, this is illegitimate. They make a claim, this is legitimate. And now we've got to involve more people, probably at a higher level, to adjudicate what's going on. So we're going to stake, again, to put a bond to their word that we want to go through the trouble of contesting this. And we need money up front to pay people who are going to participate and arbitrate this. So inviter, witnesses, and new member stake an additional 30 EOS each to back up their claim. And reporter doubles down, right? So this is the people in the induction meeting saying we want to contest this, and the reporter at the same time has to say, yeah, this is illegitimate and these people are lying. I'm gonna put more in. So where I already said 40 EOS, I already put up 40 EOS to back my word. I'm going to put even more in because I know this is fraudulent. So this really takes a lot of commitment. Like, this is a lot of people really knowing they're on the right side of things, because now we're putting in a lot of money. So 30 EOS each, that's where this comes from, and 30 more EOS from the reporter and the new member as well. So now the pot gets a lot bigger. So now we pull high-level delegates to act as the jury. So let's hand wave and say what we've been calling the board, the top people. These are the most trusted people. These are the most delegated to people. So let's just say that's the jury. We take 3 out of that group. Well, now we're going to review they're going to review the profile and judge. So before we go through this column, again, any questions about how we got to the third column?
No, not per se. I'm wondering, so what happens if if you get to the point where there's a witness contesting the report, but then like what if somebody blinks essentially? What if the reporter doubles down, but somebody doesn't put up their stake and it just hangs? Like, let's see here.
So at this point, at each point in each column, which is really the state change, there's a standing situation, right? So the middle column is the reporter has said this is a bad profile.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole second column is dealing with the current claim, if you will, is that this is a bad profile. So if you don't continue or fix something, like you always have an opportunity in the second column to resolve it somehow. You can say, oh, that's right, I didn't check the links, sorry, I'll fix the link. And if that's the case, you resolve. If it's fraud and the witnesses say, hey, we had no idea, but this is fraud, this is the people involved, including the reporter, resolving it themselves. So at this point, this is a failure to resolve internally. And a failure to resolve internally, we haven't even talked about like what to do with the profile, but this essentially stops the person from becoming a member. There's something wrong with the profile. We essentially reject the induction. And currently, at minimum, the induction times out in 7 days. So this person would just never become a member.
So is there any way to abuse this to stop somebody from becoming a member just because, I mean, if you wanted to pay enough money, could you just stop somebody from becoming a member?
So this is part of what's trying to be ironed out here, right? First, we wanted to make sure the incentives at each step make sense, but there's also a timing element here, right? So one of the things we discussed, which is not represented here, but one of the things we discussed is, well, do we have people start the induction process and then have a pending time period, a 30-day review of profiles where this process can happen? Or does the person become a member and then their profile can be reported at any time? Now, what we preliminarily came to is, well, we don't want to have a 30-day pending because then it takes forever to get into the community. And if you update your profile and add something fraudulent, well, we want to catch that too, obviously. So we'd prefer to have reporting ongoingly in the community. So that means that this whole process is happening post-induction. But if we do that, then we don't have, see, is there anything we don't have? I think that actually works out. But this is the kind of things we had to talk about, like when is this process going to happen? And then the time period. If somebody essentially is spamming, if they have a bunch of money, they can just report any profile. So that's effectively spam. We have to make that what we think is costly enough that that's not going to happen. So if somebody does that, they can cause spam. They can cause busy work for people, but everyone involved is getting paid, especially if it goes as far as to convene a jury. You got a lot of EOS involved. And if this is ever a problem, all we do is tweak these numbers, right? If the membership is honest, which is fully what we expect, and there's people spamming, well, we're gonna remove the spammers as quick as possible. And we can tweak these values to make these higher because honest people are like, well, whatever, I'll stake whatever. I can stake larger values because I'm just going to get it back. As long as it's a number that, is a reasonable amount of money to temporarily put out there as a deposit on something, and we can make these numbers higher. So while this is our best aim at what we think makes sense now, as we see the behavior of the community, any and all of this can change.
That makes sense.
But the timing actually, I should try to put our conclusions about timing in a slide as well, because that's not shown here, and that's a critical piece of this. Because if let's say we didn't, just as one scenario we discussed, if we leave induction as a 7-day expiration and we require this process during that 7 days, well, it's really easy to just commit fraud at the last hour and not give enough time to report. Or if you report and this whole process has to finish within those 7 days, that becomes a problem as well. So there's definitely a time element that's critical to this process.
Got it.
All right, let's get through the last column, and then I have to imagine we'll have some questions on this because there's lots of juicy ones here. I actually thought of one I don't think we've asked yet, just in explaining this. All right, so we convene a high-level jury. And what do we mean by high level? I mentioned the board. We're looking for people who the community has chosen as trustworthy. So that might be a D3, a delegate at level 3 or even 2, right? Someone who's made it through a couple rounds of people saying, yeah, this is someone we want to represent us. We put that jury together, and we have them make a ruling. So they're ruling, they're going to review the quote unquote evidence, which is just look at the profile, click on the links. Is the profile the same as the video, right? There's not a lot to do here. But they're going to look at that and determine what's going on. If it got this far, we don't even know what this would look like, but if it got this far, you'd have to assume it's either fraud and easy to detect, or maybe it's something subtle. Maybe this is a fraudulent account and that's not obvious somehow. I don't even know. We just needed a process to handle what's going to come up.
Yeah.
So either the reporter was correct or the reporter was incorrect and harassing. So if the reporter is correct, we take what's in the pot and we distribute it this way. So if the reporter is correct, he should get a big payout. The jurors had to take time to make the ruling. And, it probably didn't take much, but they had to take time out of their lives. There's 3 of them. So we incentivize them. And the people involved lose. In this case, 40 EOS each. Big penalty for taking it this far, right? If you did commit fraud or you were negligent and you didn't put the extra effort in to get it resolved here, well, you should be penalized for that. We're looking for this to be this really, like, let's remember this is all about penalizing and negative stuff, but let's remember that this is a simple process and we just want the process to work. And we're actually dealing with what we hope is something that never happens, but of course these corner cases do happen. So we're really dealing with stuff that we expect extremely infrequently, but we want to heavily penalize people involved who pushed it this far. And we want to incentivize the people who pushed it this far who were in the right. And if the reporter was wrong, the reporter loses everything they staked, which again is appropriate. If you're harassing and you took it this far and involved so many people, we definitely want to penalize that. The jurors get paid out, and the witnesses get paid for their trouble as well, because now their member took extra time to become part of the community. They wasted their time going through this process, so they get incentivized as well. And it looks like I did do the update that I said I didn't do earlier. So this last scenario, I'll just have to tell you retroactively, because it doesn't, it's not here anymore. The last thing I had to do on this slide is this last scenario. We didn't have enough staked to properly incentivize the people involved, because now not only are there 3 jurors to compensate, but the original crew also has to be compensated. And the first time we got here, I'm pretty sure, what did I change? I'm pretty sure it was this 30 EOS I added. I think I just bumped that from like 20 to 30 EOS because I just didn't have enough to pay out so many people. When I took, what would that be? 30, 40, I think I had 40 EOS. And so splitting 40 EOS between 7 people just seemed like not enough. So bumping up staking earlier in the equation in a way that I felt was appropriate to the situation gave me sufficient funds at this point to pay out appropriately.
Cool. my brain started thinking of ways that like, I started trying to figure out ways that we end up in the higher level jury being convened in like some sort of like really weird case where the truth is like difficult to discern.
Yeah.
Like what would that look like? It's a really weird situation.
Yeah. Again, this is dirt simple stuff, so there shouldn't be many scenarios like that.
Yeah.
But I think maybe I don't even think this is like a really solid example, but let's just say somebody says, this is my LinkedIn account and they've got credentials and I've been on TV and like, I don't know, something that gives credibility. And somebody goes, well, they haven't done any of that stuff on their LinkedIn, or that's not their LinkedIn. They don't have a picture on their LinkedIn and that's not their LinkedIn. Something like that. It might take a moment to resolve something like that, but that could be as simple as the jurors could get on a Zoom call with the person whose profile it is, and the person can show, look, I can log into this, and this website that's on there, here's the website, or here's me on TV. It's uploaded to YouTube. It wouldn't take long to prove something that's honest. And I think by default, because of that, you would rule against something that couldn't easily be proven, because all of this should be really easy to prove.
I was thinking of the case that someone was being impersonated. Like, say you hadn't heard from somebody in a really long time,
right?
And then all of a sudden they reached out and like they'd been hacked, and maybe they're like on vacation in India, so they don't have any internet access. But they want to become an Eden member, and they go through the process. They like just crib all these whoever their targets.
They've got to appear on video, right?
Yeah, I don't know how. I'm just trying to think. Maybe there's some deep fake technology at play here. Yeah. But then somebody's like, wait a second, like something's weird here, that'd be like, I was trying to figure out a case where it'd be like really difficult to figure out the truth. Yeah. But that's probably extreme. And I don't even know what the benefit would be to like running, like a temporary deep fake Eden member account.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Stakes aren't high enough.
Yeah.
And as with a lot of this stuff, the whole point that's way too big a statement. A huge theme in the book is get the process right, and you're good, right? The process needs to protect. The process is the core of what we're trying to build here. So if the process is right, then you've got so many other fail-safes. All three other people on the call should have some relationship to the person on the video call.
Yeah.
Preferably one of them knows them reasonably well. So they would be able to know a deep fake or talk to the person on a phone, and like they'd be able to verify somehow that things are legit. And then again, even if someone gets through the process and gets voted up, now you're deep faking your way through multiple election rounds, and then you get money and you start spending that money in some wonky way. How long does that go on before somebody goes, something's wonky here? There's only so far you can get, and it's increasingly unlikely as you go down that chain. So I think we've stacked that stack is well structured to make this nearly impossible. Like, you might get over the first hurdle, but you're not going to get over the next few. So yeah, it's important to make sure this process is in place, but it shouldn't represent much of a risk. But we'll see. People surprised, so we're ready to be surprised.
Yep. Things break, then we fix them.
Yep.
Or you fix them. I call you up, Mike. There's something broken. We got a problem. Cool. So does that kind of covers the whole flow of funds here?
Yeah, it's this one slide. glad we got a chance to do it all today. That's perfect. And this is something I asked Dan when I first joined early in my days at Block One. I asked Dan, right? I had studied game theory and I had heard people in blockchain talk about cryptonomics and the game theory involved in all these different scenarios. And I asked him, I was like, do you actually do the scenarios? Do you actually do the math, or is it kind of hand wavy, like, well, this is incentivized and that's not incentivized? He's like, no, we actually model it. And so it's really cool to be doing this model and find, when you get into this level of detail, you can't think through this off the top of your head. So to get into this level of detail and see, generally the plan worked out, but then we got to that last scenario and I was like, oh yeah, this scenario doesn't make any sense. And you don't want to just trip into that and find out, oh, the jury doesn't want to participate because it's not worth my time. Oh, we should have thought about that. So we've done the modeling, and now we know that these scenarios are reasonable. I could see people arguing any of these, but it's reasonable.
Seems fairly reasonable to me.
Yeah.
Good work. Yeah, and hopefully we never have to get to scenario 3 or whatever that is.
Hopefully we did all this thinking and we never get there.
Yeah. Sweet. I have one.
That's what I got. Any questions out there?
It's still kind of a sleepy Tuesday here, but we've got one question from Jay Taylor. If you want to pivot now towards a little more abstract.
Yeah, let's do it.
Eden OS level talk. Can you articulate a difference between Eden on EOS versus Eden on top of $EOS versus Eden within EOS? For example, do we need a tariff? If Eden pays tariffs for a cross-chain Eden project.
Wow.
Lots there.
That's
a lot of stuff going on there.
Question. All right, let's take it piece by piece. Let's see. Eden on EOS versus Eden on top of, I assume it's the currency EOS, versus Eden within EOS. All right, so Eden within EOS, I can't quite parse that. Eden on EOS is just taking the concept of fractal democracy, building tools for that, which we call Eden OS, and executing that on the EOS blockchain, right, as a test bed and an in-place community with governance challenges to see how these concepts play out in reality. Let's see, on a currency, let me think about what that might mean. It's so using the currency, using EOS as the currency in the community. I think that's the best place I can go. Can you articulate the difference between? So, yeah, I don't know about the difference, but yeah, I think the best thing I can say to address all of those topics is this is just a test bed. We're using EOS because that's convenient. We're using EOS because we can easily stake with EOS, right? If we said, oh, we're just going to do this with dollars and bank accounts and whatnot, well, that's a mess to tie all that together. So doing this on the EOS blockchain makes that super easy to stake and refund, pay very easily and quickly, distribute funds really easily, and by smart contract. So it's a particularly technically easy way to execute a lot of the fractal governance process. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. Now, do we need a tariff? Oh, back up. I want to get the second half. If Eden pays tariffs for a cross-chain Eden project. Okay, so tariff, for those who haven't been around the conversation, we're talking about and this is future, this is not in the next release, but this is what we're thinking about. The community, the Eden community, is going to have its internal budgets that are not will be able to be transferred internally from ledger account to ledger account without having to do an EOS transfer, without having to actually move EOS outside of the contract. It'll just be a ledger entry in the Eden contract. When you move funds out of the Eden community, we're talking about a tariff. And the incentive there being, we want to be working with each other as much as possible. If someone in the community can do something, let's find them and promote them and have them develop a reputation in the community. So if you move funds out of the community, we've talked about a tariff. Now, cross-chain would be interesting. I suppose what there is to say about that is you can run Fractal Governance anywhere. You could run Fractal Governance in, your secret poker playing club. Like this technology, the ideas can be used anywhere. And if it's run on something else, I won't name a particular project because that would be bad, but even on some other blockchain project of your choice, you'd essentially have two different communities who, when they interact, could apply tariffs between each other. I'm sure there's a protectionist war that could go on there, but this is absolutely something that could be done cross-chain. And sure, tariffs are an option. The point being, I suppose, critically, is that this is all about self-governance. This is all about human beings coordinating their own efforts. So if they want a tariff, they can make a tariff. If they don't want a tariff, they won't have a tariff. And we'll see the consequence of those decisions and see who works out better.
I have a question that's kind of a half-baked question. I was actually thinking about it the other day, and it's related to tariffs. Because I was thinking about the analogy of like the small town where you've got the mom and pop shops and the Walmart.
Yep.
And you want, say if you're trying to govern your small town, you'd like to incentivize people to shop at the small mom and pop shops and not the Walmart. So maybe, you'd consider a tariff on any any expenditures at the Walmart. Would effectively be taxed, and that money would come back to the community in some way, shape, or form. But I started thinking about like all the ways that gets, well, it's hard to enforce and it's hard to track in a certain setting. Maybe less so on EOS or with a smart contract. And I started thinking, like, isn't the inverse of a tariff, instead of penalizing behaviors that take money out of the community, isn't the inverse to just incentivize behaviors like when money is flowing within the community? So say like members offer discounts on their services, so you're incentivized to operate within the network, or like say a percentage of inflation, if there was inflation to direct, could be pointed towards in group commerce versus out group flow. Are there maybe some advantages to incentivizing rather than trying to stop the flow through like a penalty?
Yeah, so let's remember about inflation. We've gotten used to inflation because we use it in cryptocurrency to fund infrastructure, right? To fund the system.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the system, our system. So while we've gotten used to that, inflation is still inflation. So we want to be careful about inflating as an incentive devalues the currency. So I don't know that works out. I have to actually think through that, but I don't think that works out, and it at least moves prices higher and higher as time goes on, especially in a small community.
Yeah, it would depend on. Yeah, I mean, you could end up. Yeah, it could be a bad move. It could also it could work depending on the economy in particular, and
on the flip side,
what people are getting out of that, because it's a tax, and inflation is effectively a tax on everybody that's holding the currency.
Right.
So,
which has negative impact within the community. The tariff has negative impact. Well, negative impact, desired impact outside the community by making it expensive for money to move outside the community. So as long as you stay in the community, you're not penalized, right? Except this is the prisoner's dilemma of tariffs in general. And your Walmart example, right? If you buy from the local store and we keep Walmart out, well, you're not going to get cheap stuff. You're not going to get, cheaper stuff than you currently have. That does have a financial cost. You are paying more for the stuff.
mm-hmm.
So now it gets into incentive. Well, why are we doing all this in the first place? If I can get cheaper stuff, wouldn't I want cheaper stuff? Well, where are you getting it from? And what's happening to all those moms and pops? What happens to small business? And I think the primary consideration that the book brings up is independence. Are you maintaining an economy locally who's producing things? Are you producing tools locally? Are you producing clothes locally? Are you producing anything locally? Or do you let the outside in and provide everything imported, such that when we completely hypothetically have shipping issues and ports that are backed up and we're having supply chain issues, hypothetically, you're not susceptible to that. Well, we already have clothes. I don't need clothes from everywhere else. Whereas if you kill your independence and you're just importing everything, and then you have a supply chain issue across the world. I mean, this could happen, literally on the other side of the planet, and all of a sudden you can't get something, right? CPUs in cars, I think we talked about recently. That was a big one in the news. If all of a sudden you can't get, you're a rental car company, you can't get a fleet of cars, you literally just can't order as many as you need, you're susceptible. So the motivation typically in this scenario is independence, and that's part of what we're aiming for with Eden. It's a small scale, obviously. This is a trial, so it doesn't work the way it would at scale, but it's all the same concepts, and there is still power in it even at small scale.
I think it kind of highlights the fact that, I say the fact, but maybe it's not, I shouldn't be so bold, but it highlights kind of the idea that certain elements of, any community, even a currency and stuff, is kind of only as strong as the culture that supports it. Because at the end of the day, there are all sorts of non-monetary values that the community should probably hold that, you can get cheaper goods at Walmart, but if you do the math, you'll see that you're going to end up with just Walmart, and then you won't have any of these other options. So even if you have to pay more for those things, in the long run, is it worth it as a community to pay more, or to make some trade-offs like that for the
and to make this, to put this on the court, make it much less hypothetical, although I'll still leave it a little vague for the acceptance of my statements. Let's say hypothetically there's an arguable impact on freedom that's being applied nationwide, or at least state by state, or at least in areas at a time, and you disagree with the impact on your freedom. You have the opportunity to avoid those places who are impacting your freedom, right? If hypothetically there's some kind of mandate that you disagree with, and it's by town or by county or by state, you have the opportunity to say, okay, well, you don't get my business. And I may or may not have done that more than once recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I've become stubborn about it because these principles matter. I have sworn off entire cities.
Yeah.
And to me, that matters. And I think the more people who say, "Oh, I'm not going to deal with this," you're out. You create this. This is the manpower that Dan talks about in the book.
Mm-hmm.
You take that away. Enough people take that away and decide, I'm not going to play this game. You don't get any of my business, none of my money, none of my participation, none of my contribution. I'm going to move my business out of your state. Think about Elon Musk leaving California. This is a huge demonstration of that.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing something that impinges on my freedom and how things should work. I'm leaving. I'm taking all of my innovation and all of my employees and all of the sales and revenue, all that good stuff, and we're going to take it away.
Mm-hmm.
Each of us have the capacity to do that, and the culture that's, shall we call it, stubborn about that, or at least clear-minded and rigorous about that, it's going to be a stronger culture. You're going to get benefits out of that. I'd rather live in a area where Elon Musk runs to and builds awesome things in than not. So,
which incidentally you might be. Here's a question. Can you have, I think, a company within a community? Can you have company within a community?
I got great company in this community.
You have great company. I think you meant a company, like a business.
Yeah.
Yes, a small one?
Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely. This kind of is a can of worms of a lot of different answers, but yeah, absolutely. You can in a easy to envision future for any Eden community. You can have an Eden profile. You can have a company profile on Eden, and so you say, "Hey, I'm an Eden member, and I've got a company, and I'm a sole proprietor. I offer software consulting, IT consulting, and you advertise yourself to members. If you can do something that the community needs, let's say something like a block producer, but that's hand waving. But let's say you offer a block producer service, and you provide solutions. You provide APIs for apps, right? Maybe by offering your solution, people in the community who aren't paying a tariff, right, or aren't subject to a tariff, can use your history solution, your API node, to write really easy apps. You write a really nice API to enable apps, and people in the community can write apps really easily and cheaply. Well, maybe you hire people to make that happen. And maybe you work with app developers, or you create an in-house studio, game studio or something. I could absolutely see stuff like that happening within communities. Eden On EOS will be small communities, but there's a potential for bigger communities where that answer becomes an even stronger yes. So absolutely.
Cool. Here's a question that should be really straightforward, but maybe we can make it as philosophical as possible and see what happens.
All right, we'll make this the last one too. I get to get going.
I have one bonus question because this is such an easy one.
Okay, how much is each EOS worth? It's worth one EOS.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. It's potentially worth anything. It's infinite. It's infinitely variable in its value. But yeah, the current price is $5 something.
$5.31. $5.31. There's your answer.
Okay, but here
the only real answer, by the way. Here's just a little bit of philosophical answer.
There you go.
Or it's not even philosophical, economic answer. It's worth what people are willing to pay for it. Right now, that answer is $5.31. Yeah, that's pretty much it. If we use it in additional ways, that'll make it worth more because we'll want to use it. Other people want to interact with us, and that means more demand for the currency, which makes the price go up.
Here, one bonus question, which is, I I pulled from a Telegram chat from somebody who's probably wants to be not on Twitter, YouTube, just for funsies.
Who wants blockchain and social media? I mean, really. That's it. That's a great question. It's actually a really good question. And in a sense, I've asked this question of myself. I kind of just drop the word blockchain and who wants social media anyway. I mean, really.
Yeah.
But let's assume that there's value in social media. And let's also, I'm not going to go at least into depth into the value of blockchain, but let's assume there's value in blockchain. Well, if there's value in social media and there's value in blockchain, then if you tie those two together, there's probably an overlap. In the case of social media, how do I know my account hasn't been hacked? How do I know the authenticity of the author? Well, that's something that blockchain can add quite a bit of integrity to. What's another example? Blockchain, the way we're envisioning it on Clarion, actually completely changes how you relate to blockchain anyway. So why have blockchain and social media? Well, because you can what's called derive state. You can look at history. You can actually do things that you can't do with integrity, at least with non-blockchains. You can't verify the order of things and verify the current state of things without a blockchain. If you want that integrity, if you want that traceability. So if traceability and certain features in your social media is interesting to you, then it's valuable to put it on blockchain. The other thing to consider is, I'm going to try to think of how to put all this in a simple statement, but what we mean, we have to remember when we say social media, this is like saying, well, really, what's the value of blue? Like, it's such a broad statement, right? Social media includes all kinds of stuff, right? We think of Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, but social media includes lots of stuff, right? A traditional newspaper with a website can include social media aspects, right? The news is now integrating, here's the tweet of the day, and tell us what you think in the comments. Like, we're starting to see social media everywhere. It's kind of like gamification. It's become this phenomenon that's attached to a lot of things and involved in a lot of things and expresses itself a lot of ways, right? What do we really mean by social media? People involved, kind of crowdsourced maybe, or crowdsourced in a literal sense, not how we typically mean crowdsourced, not leveraging an entire crowd, but sourcing things from the crowd. That's really all that means. So if you want to have a social technology with integrity, well, then you want a blockchain. Well, Eden is exactly that. Coordinating human beings, which is obviously and fundamentally social, and we want integrity. So who is this person? How do we know how they spent their money? How do we know who invited them? When they were invited, all that history and how it's tied together. How do we know that someone didn't just hack the database and change it? Well, we have a blockchain. It's all public record. How do we know that one person didn't hack a centralized database and change their records so that they could commit fraud with their own money that they got from Eden? Blockchain. All right. That's a higher level answer, and we could get way into the weeds on that, but I would say that's why blockchain social media. And I have to say, as with all things, we can cheapen and degrade and dilute that term, blockchain social media, into ridiculous, useless things, which is probably where that question is coming from. Anything can be put on a blockchain, including, what was it, Arizona iced tea? One of the iced teas, yeah. Right? Added blockchain to their name. You can slap blockchain on anything, but as Chris Farley said in Tommy Boy, it's not going to get you what you want. I'm not going to quote the movie, but yeah, it's an easy thing to cheapen, and you do lose the point. And there's such a valuable point that it's a terrible point to lose, but it will get diluted and has been many times.
If, one more little thing on this, and I know you kind of want to head out here, but I like to just try and keep you as long as I can. So what do you say then to people that say, sure, fine, that's all good. All those qualities that you ascribe to like blockchain meets social together are laudable, except what about anonymity and the value of being kind of an unknown actor in a fairly totalitarian leaning society?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think
I'll just give you the easy ones at the end here, like
I think there's two different answers to that I want to give, and I'm trying to get the first one articulated in my head. One answer to that is actually Clarion, right? Where we take we kind of redefine or at least let's just deconstruct all language right now. So we deconstruct blockchain, social media. Let's deconstruct blockchain. What is a blockchain? It is a chain of blocks, right? Think about when we make it that literal, that simple, we take out a lot of connotation. There's a lot of things we think when we say blockchain that destroys, right? Because I could have a chain of blocks. A kid could have a chain of wooden blocks. I mean, it's like we could really break this down really far. But I want to make that point just to clarify. When we talk about Clarion, when we talk about Clarion, we're using the idea of a hashed chain of blocks in a very different way. It's not a logically centralized blockchain, right? What Dan has been calling microchains, or you might call them subchains, is kind of ambiguous, but that's another term we could use here. These are personal blockchains, if you will. And that throws into question a lot of things, right? How do you establish authority and sequencing, right? Order of events on a personal blockchain, right? It's twisting a lot of ideas that we're used to being particular ways in blockchain. But what if we could have a verifiable by some means hashed chain of blocks that isn't logically centralized, that isn't accessible to everyone? Well, now, one step toward anonymity might be not anonymity, but privacy. Let's say I'm willing to be Mike Manfredi and share a bunch of detail, but only with these 10 people who I really trust. Well, I can do that on Clarion, or at least I will be able to do that on what we're planning on Clarion being. That's the point. And maybe there's even like concentric circles of trust where at some point very soon, maybe I'm more on the anonymity side, and beyond these 10 people, I never show myself on video. Or maybe there's only 3 people like that, and then I don't show myself on video. That would be more the extreme end of anonymity. But that privacy, I think, is extremely valuable. I think that's very easy to argue, and something that we're really pushing for in Clarion. To go full anonymous, I think I would leave that as simple as we've got projects working specifically on anonymity and that level of privacy. They're going to come up with those solutions, right? We're trying to get one level of this done, and maybe someone takes it to another level based on what we did. Or maybe we do that next. Who knows? Like, I don't think we'll do that next because we've got so much to do, but someone could just piggyback on what we've done and take that to the next level. And the other thing is we've got some amazing projects. I can only think of one of them, but I've read about 2 or 3 of them. Enigma is one of them, using something called homomorphic encryption. There are opportunities to transact online where it's a logically centralized blockchain, but it's not readable by everyone. So it's not public the same way most current blockchains are. That's going to enable a lot of cool things.
What did you call that? Homomorphic?
Homomorphic encryption. Largely, all that means, if you haven't heard the term, is normally we take encrypted data, and if it's data we can actually calculate on, we can actually work on in software. You would take my encrypted message. If I say I want to add 2 plus 2, let's just use a calculator, and I encrypt 2 plus 2, and I send it to the calculator. Well, obviously, the calculator would have to decrypt my message to see the 2 plus 2 to do the operation and send me back 4. So I would encrypt 2 plus 2, send it to the calculator server. Server would decrypt it, take 2 plus 2, make 4, encrypt it, send it back to me. Homomorphic encryption is this complete cryptographic magic where I send encrypted 2 plus 2 to the server never decrypts it, and somehow produces encrypted 4 and sends that back to me. Right? I have to go back in my next life. I will study cryptography and understand all this stuff, but that's crazy math magic.
That's some beauty right there. Yeah,
it's obviously, well, I don't know. Obviously, it is more computationally intensive, and it's a new, relatively new area of cryptography. But when you have that kind of capacity to do stuff in a coordinated manner with other people online, where you share keys maybe with a few people you want to coordinate the data, and you can do all that in the open, but in a coordinated way, man, that's some cool tech. So we have so many things on the way. The only part of that question that I think is kind of maybe the hardest part, not technically, is, well, if you're not on video, like, we need some means of verifying you. You're not going to KYC. You're not going to be on video. All we've got is username. Okay, maybe there's some way to make that happen, right? What would it look like to develop reputation based on a username? It's possible, right? There's sites where all you have is a username, and you do have reputation on those sites. Mm-hmm. Essentially, Reddit is like that, right? Mm-hmm. Stack Overflow could be like that. You can easily be an anonymous username and have reputation and answer questions and build a profile. In what scenarios would you want to trust that and not? In what scenarios could you maybe cross over the digital anonymity with actual social trust, where you have other digitally reputable people vying for you non-digitally? Maybe there's some way to mix all that together, but it's a pretty challenging problem. So
cool.
How's that? Wow, nice.
You're getting the did you see that behind me? I'm in a lightning storm, in case anyone didn't notice. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Mike. And that was a very thorough answer to a fairly challenging question that you could have just completely dodged or sidestepped. So kudos for tackling it relatively head on. And yeah, it's a nuanced issue. Online identity.
It's a fun challenge for sure, and I really do think there are plenty of solutions out there for most of it, if not all of it. So, hopefully we'll inspire that next level, and all this will be available to anonymous communities. And maybe you run Eden on an anonymous community, for a website, Eden for Reddit or Eden for Stack Overflow or something like that, where maybe the stakes aren't high enough to even really worry about it. Like, your reputation, and if you have 5 screen names, maybe we're not allocating money. If you don't have a budget, do we really care? We just know you have a reputation, and we'll just bump you up based on that. Like, there's a lot of variation here. Not all communities need to be the same.
Yeah. What? We're not trying to create homogenous world order? What? I'm in the wrong group. No. Well, cool. I just want to remind everybody to, if you made it this far, you're still watching, then you might want to jump in this Friday. We're going to start a new series. It's going to be a reading of More Equal Animals. which is the source material that a lot of these ideas are coming from, the book by Dan Larimer, right up there on Mike's shelf. And yeah, we're going to take it about 20 pages at a time. I think the first Friday, Mike, you're going to be joining us, right?
Right.
And try to distill the core concepts from the book in short summary format. So that should be a fun exercise in being concise, if we can. So that'll be this Friday, 8 a.m. CST or 1300 UTC. And from there, we'll see everybody next week for the next update with Brandon Fancher.
By the way, new term, tech hipster. I think tech hipsters are people who specify in UTC. I think that's
oh shit! Oh, I didn't know I was gonna get like a new label stuck on me today. Hi, I'm Brandon, and I'm a tech hipster. I'd like to invite you to our podcast in UTC time. We'll be meeting next Friday at 1300 UTC, and I expect you to load up World Time Buddy in your browser and translate that to your local time. Well, we need like a universal time translator where I just say my local time and everyone hears their own local time.
Yeah.
Work on that. That'd be nice. Then I don't have to be a tech hipster.
All right, Brandon, thanks a lot for the time once again. Great conversation.
Yeah, great chatting with you. Thanks for the update and showing us the flow of funds model, and thanks for working all that out so we didn't have to spend our precious brain cycles thinking about that. That looks mind-boggling. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Sounds good. Catch you all then.
And maybe I can even... Here we go. All right. Catch you later.
All right, bye-bye.